Hello and welcome to the channel. For a while I've been thinking about some kind of diorama build including the T60 power armor. The rough idea was to include the power armor as well as the Brotherhood of Steel flag in some kind of just small arrangement that I could enjoy. So in this video I'll walk through the layout design of the diorama, the priming and painting of the 3D printed T60 power armor, the building of the wall behind the power armor that will have the stencil of the Brotherhood of Steel flag on it. And finally I'll be texturing and painting the base. I think this is going to be a fun build, so stick around. I recently read a great diorama book by the author Shepard Payne. The book is vintage, but the information is still valid and valuable. One of the recommendations by Shepard is to angle your subjects slightly on your diorama. So here I'm going to angle the wall as well as turn the power armor just a little bit. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this, so let's make some marks, cut the foam to size, and move on. I figured I would start with the wall because I'm not sure if I have enough bricks to do the entire thing. So by getting into it, I'll be able to estimate if I have enough or not. And if I don't have enough, I can start printing another batch while I'm working on another piece of the diorama. The Cinder Blocks is a great print. The person who modeled them modeled 4 different types to give a little variety. You can see some repetitive patterns in here, but I think I can offset that when I do the mortar. For the mortar line spacer, I'm just using some scraps of styrene. I think it's important to leave a gap between these blocks. You know, you're used to seeing things a certain way throughout your life, whether you realize it or not, and as soon as that's different, you would notice it. When I started the wall, I left the end section open. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it. In the end, I decided to stagger the bricks as if the wall was continuing beyond the edge of the diorama. There are a lot of different ways I could have made this wall. I think if I carved it from foam, it would look like a stone wall and not a cinder block wall. So I ruled that out. I have seen 3D print files of brick walls, and they're just too perfect. They look 3D printed. Maybe a small scale like HO model railroad scale 1/87th or N scale 2/20th would look pretty good. You know, maybe 1/56. But at this scale, these size bricks, I think that 3D printed perfect look would it wouldn't look really that good. So I ruled that out. Another route I could have gone was to use styrene cut as the cinder blocks. The rectangle pieces of styrene cut as the face of the cinder block wall glued against the back piece of styrene to make the wall. I've seen that done, and that comes out really well. That would have probably been my second choice. At this point, I'm definitely not going to have enough blocks to finish this wall, so I need to print another batch. While those are printing, I'm going to switch over to the T60 armor and get that painted. So the T60 was a resin print. Overall, it came out pretty decent. I do have a bit of post-curing cleanup to take care of. So part of the cleanup after printing is to remove some of the additional tiny supports, as well as fill in some of those drain holes with resin and use a UV pen to cure those. Finally, touch up some of the rough spots with some of these pretty cool 3D printed sanding sticks that I found. I can link those as well. Okay, let's get this T60 primed. For priming, I'm using the Vallejo black primer, about 50/50 thinned. This goes on really nice, really good coverage on this primer. I decided to go ahead and add a light gray color just to give me some highlight references, and then just took a couple of reference photos. Just made it easier when I decided to do the highlights, I could just reference those photos. For the paint, I decided to just try to keep it simple. And a good way to keep it simple was just to use the Vallejo metallics. I started with just a little bit of the black metallic in the most shaded areas, but quickly moved into the midtones with the steel metallic paint. So after doing the midtones with the Vallejo metallic steel, it was time to put a wash on. For the wash, I use Winsor & Newton black oil paint thinned with mineral spirits. There's a lot of different washes out there you can use, enamels and oil-based, none oil obviously. Instead of that, I went and got an entire set of the Winsor & Newton oil paint, and with that I'll have an option to do any color wash that I want. I wish I had crafted up a simple vise for the figure instead of holding it the whole time. In hindsight, just a couple of wires through the resin drain holes in the bottom, twisted together to make a Y shape, might have worked. Maybe a 3D printed one for miniatures. There is quite a few of those out there. Maybe scale it up so it would fit this model. Even just 2 pieces of wood with a V-notch and bolts through them with some kind of simple handle would have helped. Next model for sure, I need to sort out something better than just holding it. If you have any suggestions or solutions that you use for a figure this size, I'd love to hear them in the comments, so please let me know. After the wash dried for a few minutes, it was time to add some highlights. For this, I used the Vallejo Metallic Chrome, and using the pictures I took earlier of the white spray over the black primer as my reference for where to place the highlights. For the final details on the helmet, I used 2 different colors. For the eyes, I used Vallejo Model Color Black, and for some of the other details, I used the Vallejo Light Gray. The final touch was adding a bit of grease look to the joints, using ABT 502 grease. And with these final highlights done, that takes care of the T60, so time to get back to the wall. Okay, my second batch of blocks is printed. Let's get back to work on this wall. So I ended up really enjoying this process. Once I got going, once I got the layers sorted and my spacing sorted, this was a thoroughly enjoyable process. Just like with a real wall or putting siding on a building, if one of your rows or courses is starting to look a little bit out of whack, don't make a drastic change with one block. Try to spread it out. So my spacing was off one of these blocks, so I decided I needed to spread it out. So by adjusting the spacing of 2, 3, or 4 of the blocks, it lets me make up that difference without it being noticeable. Using a lot of CA glue here, I could have worn gloves, but CA glue really sticks to those gloves, and I would have had bits of gloves stuck to the wall. But at this point, I had so much glue stuck to my fingers. So a tip for removing CA glue from fingers is nail polish remover. So my wife has one of those nail polish remover bottles where you put your thumb or your finger in the bottle and it's got little bristles on there that scrape it. It worked great to get the CA glue off. So with the cinder blocks and the CA glue, this wall is really front heavy now. So anytime I set it down, I need to put a machinist block in front of it to hold it up. It will fall over. I'm going to put a metal edge around this building. So I'm going to use some of these spare cinder blocks as a great gluing surface since they're the same thickness. The piece of styrene is ready to go on, but I probably should do the spackle first. So let's do the spackle and then put the styrene on second. For the mortar on the cinder blocks, I'm using spackle for drywall. So the DAP lightweight spackle is perfect for this. It's light and fluffy like whipped butter, and it dries in about 30 minutes. So once I get this spread on here, I need to wipe off the excess on the surface. I'm just using wet paper towels, just wet with water just to wipe it off so it's nice and clean. And this is a good opportunity to either fill in the gaps for the repetitive looking damage or to expose that. So with that, I was able to randomize some of the imperfections in the blocks. It could be damage, it could be just imperfections, so it worked out really well. So I think this worked out great. Very happy with this so far. So with the styrene sheet in place, I decided I would edge it with some styrene angle. Gives a nice clean edge to it. So two different sizes here. So the corner and the top edge pieces are going to be a little bit bigger. And then the bottom piece is going to be a little bit smaller. Now there's those great sanding sticks again. Love those. Hats off again to the person that designed these sanding sticks. They're fantastic. Before I paint the wall, I should spend a little bit of time on the diorama base. The cork is about half the thickness of one row of the cinder blocks. That way the building will look like it's part of the ground, not sitting on top of the ground. Once I get the cork glued on and the foam trimmed, I can add a layer of sand texture to this and just let this dry overnight while I work on the rest. Okay, onto the wall painting. So the initial primer coat that I gave it, I angled the wall away from me to paint the bottom of the bricks as well as the face. And then when I'm doing the initial cinder block color, I'm angling the wall down to help shadow the bottom and light the top. For the stencil of the Brotherhood of Steel flag, I'm using the stencil shape I have to give them the overall size. So I'll mask around the stencil shape and do the initial red coloring. The red I came up with for the flag was a mix of the Vallejo red with the Vallejo fire red. The mix was about 60-40 fire red to red. Once mixed, I add a little bit of thinner. I started light with this layer. The Tamiya tape is fantastic, but just a precaution. Just do that initial light layer around it, let that set. Then I'll go back and add a heavier layer to finish it out. Really happy with this color. And since I have the red, let's go ahead and add the Brotherhood of Steel symbol to the front of the armor. A lot of the ones I've seen are battle damaged and slightly smeared, so that just added an outline, smudge it just a little bit. It came up pretty good. To cover red with white is typically pretty challenging. A good trick is to do an intermediate color like silver or gray. Just a light coating to help mask that red, tone that red down a little bit and help me do the transition to white. So once that initial gray color was down, it's time to go ahead and add the white. So here I'm just taking my time, I'm holding the stencil down, just really being patient with it, and just trying to minimize any kind of spray going underneath the stencil. Try to keep it as clean as possible. Okay, I think we're going to call that good. Time for the moment of truth. Let's see how this came out. Not too bad. I'm pretty happy with that. I like the way the white came out. It just has a bit of a fade to it. It already looks aged even before putting a wash on it. I'm really happy with how this came out. When I was peeling the Tamiya tape off the top of the styrene, it peeled a whole bunch of the primer off. And you know what? I kind of like it. I think I'm going to run with that. I mean, I could strip it and fix it, but it already looks aged and weathered, so why not use that as a starting point and just work with it? Yeah, this is a nice Tamiya flat. It's a light bluish gray. It's just a naturally like faded blue. A little bit of flat brown just to shadow in along the edge of the angles. And a little bit of really thin Tamiya flat white in the areas where the tape peeled off just to add a little bit of highlights. Just real subtle and faded look. For the wash on the wall, I'm doing a wet on wet. So I'm just using the brush with some water and just making the wall wet. So when I add the wash, it'll just instantly run. Just trying to highlight a little bit of the detail, add a little bit more shadow, a little bit more depth to it. For the final rust and grime on the wall, I'm going to add a little bit of oil paint. So the paints I'm using is just burnt umber, burnt sienna, two most commonly used colors to create rust. Just adding small dots of the oil paint. Just using some mineral spirits and a second brush to just grab the dot and pull down and give me either rust effects or grime, whatever you need to do. And if it's too heavy, you can thin it out. You can add more paint. It's a very manageable process. Okay, finishing up the texture on the base, adding a little bit of static grass, some rocks, some more textured soil, just to give it a little bit of variety. I'm going to add a few sections of tall grass along the wall of the building. To make these, I'm just using some simple rope from the hardware store. Just dab the end in white glue and stick it on. For the initial color on the base, I'm using a couple shades of earth tone brown, some tan, and for the grass, I'll start with some darker browns, but work my way up to green and then highlights with yellow. In front of the building, I'm going to add a line of small stones just for a little bit of variety. For some final texture, I'll add some scale model leaves and a few logs. To get the leaves to stick to the base, I first put down a little bit of white glue, sprinkled the leaves on, and then mist the diorama with some IPA. Then using an eyedropper with the same white glue, but this time diluted about 50-50 with water, I add a few drops to lightly soak the areas that the leaves are on. And once that dries overnight, they're not going to come off. As I was taking the final pictures, I decided I really didn't like the base. To me, it just looks too thick. It's distracting. Stand by. We're going to fix this base because I don't like it. So I think I'm going to add a piece of veneered walnut to the front of this. Okay, so I made my decision on the thickness, marked my lines. Let's go ahead and carefully cut this with a back saw. I'm being mindful to only pull back on the saw. I think if I actually did a sawing motion, the foam would have just disintegrated. So just working my way around the base until I ran out of saw depth. I had to finish the last little bit of the cut with a box cutter. Okay, straightening up the edge. Just making the corners fit. Quick glue up of this piece of walnut. A little bit of tape just to hold it for a few minutes until the CA sets. A little bit of patchwork to do on the corner, as well as along the top of the board. There's just a couple of small gaps. I just put a little bit of filler in with my finger. For the paint of the edge, I just went ahead and mixed a gray and a black together. I wanted to be a little bit darker color than the rest of the diorama, so thinking if it's darker, you're just not going to notice it as much. I wanted to be visible, but less dominant than it looked before. So yeah, some quick paint, some quick touch-ups, and with that, I think we are done. Thanks for watching. Time for the Glamour Shots. See you next time.